time ago that probably a lot of English speakers sort of hear a lot about, see on the TV, reading the paper, they read the papers about the Statute and about Catalan nationalism, and maybe don't have a very clear understanding of what's involved. So we thought it might be interesting to bring some folks together tonight. And more than a debate, what we hope for is sort of just an educational forum in which we can all listen to the four people we have up here and go away with a little more understanding than we came in the door with. The format that we're going to use tonight is that we have two people, sort of from each point of view about Catalan nationalism, and each of them will talk for about 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor up to some questions. And then I'd say before 9 o'clock, we'll all be on our way home to supper. So without further ado, what I'd also like to say is that this is the first of this kind of event that the Metropolitan has done, but there will be more. And for anybody who's got in mind a theme or sort of a topic that they think would be interesting for this sort of discussion, if they would be kind enough to send it along to Metropolitan Magazine, either on Facebook or Twitter or any of the variety of ways to communicate, that would be good. We'll do this sporadically, and we'd be interested to know what people would like to hear about. Let me present to you, in the order in which they will speak, the people who've been kind enough to appear here tonight. And really, we can't thank them enough. And unfortunately, we're not going to thank them with an honorarium either. They're here out of the kindness of their hearts. So, first person that'll be addressing the question would be Charles Edward Rocamora. Sorry. People do that to me all the time, mispronounce my name, sorry. Born and educated in London with a Welsh father and a Catalan mother, he studied computer engineering at Cardiff University and worked as a programmer at the Royal Bank of Scotland before immigrating to Catalonia, where he has lived for more than 20 years. And while here, he obtained a master's in software engineering. He's currently employed at IBM, where he's on the Works Committee as a trade union delegate. Charles will be followed by Eric Jeffrey. Did I say that right? Eric Jeffrey? Yeah, good. And has lived, Eric is English and has lived in London and Brighton, and he's been here for 8 years. He's very involved and active in village politics, speaks, reads, and writes Catalan, and is deeply involved with seeking a solution to the conflicts between Spain and Catalonia. To my left, Nito Foncuberta is a businessman who studied law, Secretary of Institutional Relations for the political party Ciutadans, Partido de la Ciudadanía, a party in which no one serving is paid for their time, just like here. Yeah. Married with a family, he is particularly concerned about the consequences of the obsession with identity in the education of our children and the future of our society here in Catalonia. And last but not least, who kindly agreed to come on very short notice, Lluís Bosch, who has a BA in history from the University of Barcelona and a postgraduate in sociology and women's studies from the University of Middlesex. He's worked in several local media, including El País, El Periódico, and Televisión España. Presently, he's working at the Barcelona City Council, directing the publication of books on urban landscape and architecture of the city. He's been politically active for a long time, since the 1980s, and has been a member of Esquerra Republicana de Catalunya since 1989, when the party took a clear pro-independence stance. He has been president of the Ciutat Vella branch for 6 years, and is a member of the Barcelona Executive Committee of the ERC. Since 2004, he's been back in grassroots political activity. Well, welcome to everybody, and thanks again for coming. Charles, if you would be so kind. Thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was at the British Museum recently, where I managed to find something that has fascinated me for a long time: the Cyrus Cylinder. It is considered to be the world's oldest declaration of human rights, written over 2,500 years ago by Cyrus the Great when he became Emperor of Persia. Amongst other things, it gave the peoples of the Persian Empire religious freedom. However, it is without doubt the English-speaking peoples of the world who have most contributed, both in law and by custom and usage, and in many wars against foreign dictators, to the establishment of what we today think of as fundamental rights and personal freedoms, and just as important, the limits of power. I could mention the Magna Carta, the Emancipation Act, universal suffrage, the abolition of slavery, trade union laws, right down to the latest Consumer Protection and Freedom of Information Acts. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is essentially a document written by the English-speaking nations and largely accepted by the rest of the world. And who can deny the importance of the American Constitution, which enshrines the concept of personal freedom and the limits of executive power? We the people, those famous first three words that clearly define where ultimate sovereignty lies. Well, I'm sorry to say that this Catalan Statute of Autonomy is light years away from being comparable to any of these historic documents. It represents, in my opinion, and that of many experts in constitutional law, a massive power grab by the regional government, where the ultimate losers are all those of us who live in Catalonia. Now, before I go on, I would just like to make a few things clear. I mean, it really shouldn't be necessary, but in these bigoted times, anyone who disagrees with this statute is automatically disqualified by Catalan ultranationalists as being right-wing, fascist, Spanish, nationalist, anti-Catalans who know nothing about Catalonia. Well, I'm a left-winger working for a major multinational, where I'm on the Works Committee as a trade union delegate. My mother, my wife, my in-laws, and my children are all Catalans whose maternal language is Catalan, not Spanish. And I myself learned Catalan 12 years before emigrating to Catalonia. And I have the level C certificate, which I studied out of my love for the language and not of any work necessity. Now let me point out that I'm in favour of promoting the Catalan language, but I am utterly opposed to its legal imposition on private citizens or businesses. Now, I get the impression that perhaps that some of you present are already convinced either that the statute is the best thing since sliced bread or the worst thing since the Holocaust. So, I'm just going to explain why I personally don't like it from my libertarian, freedom-loving point of view. Now, as tonight I'm opening the batting, and at the risk of overextending my allotted 10 minutes, I would like to give you all a very brief overview of this statute. Well, first of all, as you can see, it is big, very big. It's almost 8 times as big as the American Constitution. It has 223 articles divided into 7 major sections, plus a preamble and some additional dispositions. Okay, Section 1 covers the rights and obligations of all Catalan citizens. And by the way, just by being empadronado, you are a Catalan citizen. And it covers all the things that the Catalan administration should promote or guarantee. And that even includes a specific article requiring that the administration works towards world peace. Isn't that nice? Section 2 deals with the organisation of the Catalan Parliament and other Catalan institutions, including the setting up of a puppet board of censorship that has the power to close down broadcasters without needing to go through the courts. Well, can you imagine a British quango closing down Capital Radio? Or Obama reassigning Fox transmission frequencies to Democrat-friendly broadcasters. Well, that can not only happen here in Catalonia, it already has. Section 3 turns back the clock nearly 300 years by doing away with the concept of a unified Spanish justice system and creating a kind of parallel system of justice more easily controllable by those in power in Catalonia. Section 4 is the biggie, with 63 articles and hundreds of clauses that define, in very generous terms, everything that the Catalan government is responsible for making policy on. And the Catalan government has, in this statute, basically laid claim to every single thing that the Spanish government is responsible for, with the possible exception of national defence. It even claims exclusive competency with regards to religious affairs, which probably comes as a bit of a shock to the Pope. I can just see Cyrus the Great spinning in his 2,500-year-old tomb. Section 5 deals with relations with other regions and forces the government of Spain to take the Catalan government's views into account on things like foreign affairs and industrial, agricultural and economic policy. Now, you have to remember that this statute is a Spanish law passed by the Spanish government and binding on the Spanish government. Section 6 covers how to fund all these new competencies and new institutions, including Catalonia's very own Inland Revenue Service and Diplomatic Corps. Well, it's a different name, but it's the same. And yes, you guessed it, we are the ones who are going to have to pay for it all, one way or another. And the last section basically makes it impossible to change the statute. Now, I'm sure that my colleagues who are today defending both nationalism and this statute are going to explain how wonderful this statute is. So I'm just going to explain why I personally don't like it. It's not just a law. It's a law that requires the Catalan Parliament to pass hundreds of laws, new laws, in order to regulate everything from immigration to deep-sea diving. It even has a clause that stipulates that the Catalan government has exclusive competency over all recreational activities. So, rereading the statute the other day, it reminded me of George Orwell's book. You know, 1984, Big Brother's watching you, the Ministry of Love. Well, in my opinion, and in Orwell's opinion, there has to be a point where government stops and personal individual freedoms take over. And if it's in this statute, I haven't found it. It must be in very small print. So, this is big government in a very big way. This is in your face, big government. And why so much? Well, the idea behind the statute is to neutralize in every way possible the actions of the government of Spain by giving the Catalan government the power to legislate on just about every matter. Now, whereas in other countries, federal law has automatic primacy over regional law, in Spain it's the other way around, at least in practice. Whenever the Spanish government passes a law that treads on the Catalan government's toes, this squeals, invasion of competencies, and takes it to the Constitutional Tribunal, rather than complying. So, the net effect is to make Catalonia as independent as it is possible to be within the limits of the Spanish Constitution. Or maybe not within, you don't know. Maybe it has many clauses which are not constitutional. One of the least savoury aspects of the statute is when it talks about rights and obligations. Or, to be more exact, when it talks about obligations. Just by living in Catalonia, you have a legal obligation to understand Catalan. So bear that in mind the next time you receive an incomprehensible final tax demand. You have no right to a Spanish or bilingual education for your children, contrary to European and UNESCO guidelines and contravening that as well the Declaration of Human Rights. Also, there are very heavy fines for those who persist in not using Catalan in their establishments, or for those who employ shop assistants who can't speak Catalan. So, there we have it. With this statute, Catalonia becomes a quasi-independent state with almost absolute powers over everything, where everyone is equal. And yet, Catalan speakers are a damn sight more equal than anybody else. A mammoth bureaucracy with its overweening desire to impose on everybody their vision of a Catalan socialist and nationalist utopia. Very similar, in my mind, to Orwell's Oceania, but where instead of having thought crime, you have linguistic crime. And why do we have to put up with so much nationalism? I mean, my colleagues defending the statute today would have you believe that it's basically love of one's own country, yes? And that they have a desire to restore their former independence, right? Or that they have a UN-given right to self-determination. Don't be fooled, okay? Catalonia has never ever been an independent nation or state, or even a kingdom. It has always belonged either to the French, Aragonese, or Spanish crowns, or during a few years, the French Empire. Catalonia is way, way outside the scope of the United Nations principle of the right to self-determination, as any unprejudiced lawyer will tell you. Nationalism was the root cause behind the deaths of maybe 100 million people in the 20th century alone. When your typical Englishman hears the word nationalism, he immediately thinks of the National Front, yeah? And a whole host of evil despots who brainwashed a gullible populace into accepting that anything is licit so long as it happens to people who aren't really people at all, because they're not like us. Nationalists always divide the world into two, us and them. And it is standard nationalist procedure, first to denigrate, then to discriminate, to marginalize, and to repress those who are not in the us category. Which is why nationalism has almost always been equated with ultra-right-wing movements. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is precisely what is beginning to happen, or is happening now, here in Catalonia. Nationalism, in this respect, is very similar to racism, yeah? And actively seeks to heighten tensions between the in-group and the out-group, because this is precisely what gives them the opportunity to present themselves as victims, and to use the pretext to seize yet more power. So, do we allow the nationalists to force us to emigrate, as happened to my Catalan mother and to my French grandmother? Or do we stay and speak out for our rights and freedoms at the risk of being tried and sentenced by these nationalists for thought crime, as my Catalan grandfather was tried and sentenced by a nationalist kangaroo court? Or do we stand up for a more tolerant, multicultural and cosmopolitan vision of Catalan society? How can we stop this flood of jobs and businesses that are flying from Catalonia in search of less oppressive regions? Well, I don't have the answer, but it is my hope that more and more people like you will come to recognize the perils that nationalism and this statute represent, and to make your voice heard. I want Catalonia to have a free, independent, unsubsidized press, freedom of choice in education, freedom for workers to be able to work anywhere in Spain without being legally obliged to know the local regional language. And I want freedom from discrimination, including the linguistic kind. That's all I have to explain. Hopefully we can hand pass too much the time.
Thank you very much, Noel.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Next, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Eric Jeffrey.
Hola, bona nit, benvinguts a tothom. I'm not going to talk to you tonight in Catalan, so don't worry. And I've actually got a terrible cold. So this morning I couldn't speak at all, so you're actually quite lucky that I'm here, or maybe not. I want to talk to you on a slightly different subject from the subject that Charles has spoken about. I don't really want to talk about the Statute because it is a technical document, it is important. I actually am not in favour of a lot of the things in it, and I think it's fair to say that Esquerra Republica are not in favour of it either. So it isn't as if it's a right-wing or centralist document. It is opposed by quite a lot of other people, but be that as it may. So I want to actually talk about Catalonia independence and why I think Catalonia should be independent as a nation and not part of Spain. And I think in order to do that, we have to start by looking at what we think a nation is. And I know, and I talked to Charles before we started here, and he said, and I think he was right really, that nations, the concept of nationhood is quite a new thing. And I think he is right, but sometimes we have to apply it retrospectively, you know, looking at roots and that kind of thing. And that's what I want to try and do. What I want to try and do here is to look at the origins of Catalonia, as it were, and express it in the way I see it. And I will actually have to talk about the Estatut, but there is an Estatut now of 1979, which you're probably not aware of, because after Franco, the Constitution, the Spanish Constitution is relatively recent, 1978, and the Estatut, which actually gives Catalonia a lot of power. Catalonia has a lot of power from the government. That's the way what happened post-Franco. Anyway, I'll come to that later on. But so let's talk about nations and nationhood. And I was trying to work out, and I was talking to my son about this, and about what makes a nation, how are nations formed. And are nations the same as countries? One definition that he found is that they have a shared culture, language, history and political principle that unite citizens in a common bond. So I thought I'd try and look at that and look at it in the concept of Catalonia. And I think in order to do that, we have to do a bit of digging. Now, I didn't actually want to give a history lesson, and I'm not a historian, but I actually feel that it is actually quite relevant here to understand how Catalonia has evolved as a country, or as a nation. Be careful with my terms.